I could name a few things that could just trigger half of the people listening already. And it's almost like I'm thinking, what's going on? Are we on our path to hell, or is this the pain before going to heaven? Like, it seems like we're at this crossroads, and I don't know if this is just a symptom of our time or if it's always been that way. So maybe you have some enlightening opinion on this one.
Yeah, it's always been that way. We're not going to heaven or hell. It's so it's so funny. I wrote that book. It came out in 2019, and I wrote it in 2017, 2018. And the reason I wrote it is I really started to notice both with I at first I started noticing it in myself and in a number of people around me that like, and I don't know if this is like a generational thing. I think it's just kind of a universal human thing. But like, I started noticing it in me and some of my friends that like, the better our lives got, the more upset we seem to be about it. Like, the more we progressed in our career, like the more stressed and upset we were all the time. And the more we achieved and, responsibilities and financial success that we, all these things that we achieved, like the more we kind of like complained about it or were freaking out, like had this like anxiety around all this stuff. And I really started to think about that, and I realized that like there's kind of a psychological advantage to having nothing, and that is you have nothing to lose, right? So when I think back to at the beginning of my career, when I was like a broke dude living on his friend's couch, trying to start a website from said couch, like I was anxious, but it was mostly just exciting because it was all upside. Like, it was never going to get any worse than that, right? Like, there was no way to go down from there. So everything I did, it all it had was upside. And so there's a certain amount of excitement and positivity that comes with that in a weird way. And then what I noticed after Subtle Art became hugely successful, and my career exploded, and suddenly I'm traveling around the world doing events, and I noticed that there was like this really intense anxiety that I'd never had before. And it took me a while to kind of figure out that that was the anxiety of losing what I had, of like, oh shit, I don't want to go down from here, but I've come up so far. It's kind of hard to not go down from here, right? Like, it's almost anything I do is probably going to underperform this last thing I did. And that just like ate away at me. It actually was very kind of depressing and demotivating. And I remember just spending 2017 thinking how like, wow, I've literally achieved like all of my goals and dreams, yet I'm like more depressed and miserable than I've been since I was like a teenager. And how weird that was, and how messed up it was. How it was like my life got so good that I like all I can think about is how I'm gonna fuck this up and how I'm gonna lose it all. And then around the same time I was kind of looking out in the world, and I realized that the same thing was kind of true about the world in general. This is pre-COVID, of course. It's like, the world is safer than it's ever been. Like, there's less crime than there's ever been. There's less war than there's ever been. There's more literacy. There's less disease. Like, life expectancy is the highest it's ever been. Education's the highest it's ever been. Obviously, there's still a lot of problems in the world, and there's a lot more progress that needs to be made. But it just kind of blew my mind that, like, literally, you have these generations of people who have never actually dealt with any real hardship in their entire life as a culture, and all they do is sit on Twitter all day, like freaking out that the world's about to end. And so I wanted to investigate that as well, how it's the same kind of thing. It's like, yeah, the difference is like if you're like a soldier in World War II, or if you're like a farmer in sub-Saharan Africa, like, you don't have much existential angst. Like, it's very clear what you need to do each day. It's very clear what you hope for. But if you're a 35-year-old professional living in New York City with a good job and a stable income, you have a lot to lose. You have a lot to be anxious about, And it's very difficult to know what to hope for. It's very difficult to know what to look forward to or how things can get better for you. And so this kind of paradox around hope and everything being fucked, which is kind of the cheeky title I ended up with. But like this idea that the better things get, the more anxious we become of losing them, and the worse things get, the more hopeful we become of things getting better. Like this kind of like psychological paradox that goes on there. Um, I decided to write a book about it, and the irony, of course, is that in the book I wrote this. I said like this is the reason we feel this way is because we've never actually had to deal with any massive like global hardship. We've never had any big war or catastrophe that's happened. And then COVID hits, and very quickly it's like it's very easy to figure out what to hope for again. Um, and so it was a weird kind of like premonition, I guess, of a global catastrophe.